Hey everybody, it's Phil Strazula from Select Software Reviews, the only website out there dedicated to expert advice on how to find, buy, implement the right HR software for your business. And today we're joined with Nicole Roberts, who has a pretty interesting story from a career path perspective, as well as her sort of ATS procurement process, specifically partnering with one of the newer vendors at the time in this space and having sort of an interesting journey as they got acquired and looking at other solutions. And Nicole's going to talk a little bit about her career path, which, as you'll find out in a second, is pretty unconventional. And also leave us with some really specific tactics that you can use when buying HR tech. Nicole, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I know that you got your bachelor's in 2018. You've been working full-time since 2004. You were a VP when you actually got your bachelor's. Can you tell us a little bit about your career path and how that all happened?
Yeah. So I'm currently the Vice President of People and Culture for MBH Partners. We have locations in 15 states supporting about 180 people in the affordable housing industry. So we are literally building dreams and changing lives. It's very mission focused, which is very important to me. I did start my career in HR in 2004 in benefits. So I was a dual major in finance and accounting actually at the time, and I was taking a business law class as an elective. And after that class, I went and talked to my advisor and I said, I want to change my major. And so I changed that day. And then a temp service actually came into one of my management classes and they said, hey, we've got this opportunity for a part-time HR assistant, not going to pay a lot, but I'll get your foot in the door. So is there anybody interested? And of course I raised my hand. So I went in and I interviewed, and it was to be an HR assistant to the vice president of HR at the company. And she hired me and I joined the team, and I was part-time at first. And then the benefits administrator left 3 months later. And so she came to me and she said, man, I was really grooming you for that. I know that you're full-time in school. So, I totally understand if you don't want to take this opportunity. And I said, I'm in school to get a job. So I took the role as the benefits administrator, 3 months into working with the company. Day one was open enrollment. So for anybody who's in HR, they know that is baptism by fire. And that was how I started my career in HR. And then I've just moved into progressively amplified roles throughout my career. So I'm what's considered a true generalist. I've done it all: payroll, benefits, workers' comp, recruiting, performance management, compliance and auditing, employee and labor relations, training and development. I've been in HR department of one in a few different iterations. And so, efficiency and automation were necessities. And so I went from being full-time student to working full-time. And so then I was part-time student. And at the time, it was kind of a brick and mortar was the only thing that you had. And eventually it got to a point where the needs of my job were such that I couldn't attend school. And so my kind of step back into education was I earned my PHR in 2009, and then I got my SHRM CP in 2015. And as an unconventional student, Western Governors University's competency-based approach really appealed to me. And so, I earned my BS in HR management in 2018, and I'll be completing my master's in management and leadership in 2021.
Wow. So you sort of got swept into the working world, and you just sort of were able to continue to advance, I guess. Did not having a bachelor's ever hold you back, do you think?
So there were definitely times when it was kind of a tougher interview process. And there are certainly industries where there was definitely an education that had to happen that, I didn't have my bachelor's degree, but I did have so much experience in so many things. And so for me, I just had to hustle that much harder and kind of prove my worth. But it has really helped me as an executive and as a professional that education is not the first thing that I ever look at when I look at a resume. I want to see what has somebody done, because you hear so many times where, people will say, oh, well, C's get degrees. Like, I want that person that was all in and super passionate about what they were doing, whether it was through their education or, through their experience. And so I'm going to look at experience and how they can apply that to what we're asking every time.
Wow, that's amazing. And I guess you at some point thought it was important to get your bachelor's, or you decided, hey, this was a university that I'm actually going to get a lot out of taking these classes.
Definitely. I'm a single mom, and so it was super important to me to show my kids that it's not when you accomplish something, but it's the fact that you do it, and you kind of overcome all odds to do that. So that was very important to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you mind talking a little bit more about your current role, sort of things you're focused on, just so we get a sense for, you've sort of done everything from benefits to recruiting. What do you do on a day-to-day basis now?
So the position was created in response to MBH partners' desire and focus on growth. And I've built teams throughout my career, and I've also built them very quickly and been with organizations that were growing very quickly. And so this position was created, and it was interesting because it was an SVP of HR position as I was interviewing for it. And the more that I asked about what are the pain points, what are the focuses, it was overwhelmingly the people and the culture of the business, and making sure that there was the resources there and the support there, and that experience to really help with the organization. And so when I did get the offer, I said to the recruiter, I really think this should be a VP of people and culture. I think it would really set a tone and really show the organization that there's this investment being made in that. And so obviously the partners agreed that that was a great idea. And so, we changed the title. And right from the start, I started March 9th and COVID basically exploded March 11th. And so in the beginning, I was kind of the chief communications officer, making sure that the organization, both internal and external, that we were making sure that people understood, how we're impacted and what we're doing, and that they have our support. The executive team, we were meeting twice a day in the beginning, and I was the one source that was putting out the information and making sure that people felt like they were supported and taken care of, because the affordable housing industry is an essential industry. And so, it's essential that people have a place to live. So we were still working, full steam ahead, despite different states and different locations that were kind of shutting down or shuttering. We were still moving full steam ahead. And so as we got our kind of arms wrapped around that situation and made sure that people felt really supported and made sure that they had the resources that they need, because, things got scarce for a little while, then I was able to focus more on, okay, let's make sure that if we're going to plan to, double in size in the next 2 to 3 years, what does that team look like? What systems do we need? What do we have currently? And so I came in and I took a look and I said, okay, well, with this system that we have for our HCM, what can we do with that? What other functionality is there still available? Because coming in and changing systems completely, that doesn't always make sense. And so you have to look at maximizing the capabilities of the system first and foremost before you say, I need to hire another person, or before you say, I need to buy another system. And so I started to have meetings with our Paycom rep and started to look at, what we were using, what we had set up, and was it set up to meet our needs, or, was it maybe a carryover iteration? And so we started to kind of retool the way that we were doing things. And we actually stopped using the kind of built-in ATS that was part of the Paycom system, and we implemented Newton Software, which was acquired by Paycor. I'd used it in previous companies and felt very strongly that it was going to meet our needs and help us in our growth. And so as an ongoing basis now, I have my team, and we're actually just getting ready to start performance reviews right now. But we purchased the performance piece of Paycom so that we can have that, in the system. People can fill out their reviews on the app. The manager can do it in the app. I'm really pleased with the employee and the manager experience that Paycom provides. When you go to implement a new system, if it's really exciting and cool and has all these bells and whistles that make HR's life easier, that has no impact on the rest of the organization. You need to really focus on what is the experience going to be like for my people, for my managers, and definitely for the employees, that, their focus does not need to be wasting a lot of time trying to figure out how to get things done. They need to focus on their job and supporting our residents and our communities.
Yeah, I love, first of all, that you were so thoughtful about your title, because I think that there's sort of this pretty interesting shift within the people space where a lot of HR teams are rebranding to people operations. And in particular, what I find is there's a high correlation between those teams and the more innovative sort of culture, employee first organizations. And so it's pretty cool to run across somebody else who's sort of understands that and is helping to change their organization. And titles matter in these things, like actually have an impact in culture and who you recruit. I'm kind of curious to rewind, because I think the first time you bought Newton was in 2012, if I remember. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of a brand new entrant into the ATS space at that point. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization that you had then, the challenges, why were you looking for an ATS, and how Newton kind of got on your radar and how you started getting interested in that system in particular?
Yeah. So I joined the care center, which was a 2 locations of a emergency and specialty veterinary medicine practice. The 2 locations were about 45 minutes apart, so pretty regionally located. And that was in February of 2013 as the HR director there. And so I was an HR department of 1, and I needed to utilize the current systems to the fullest. So we already had a relationship with Paycor. We were already a client of theirs at the time. And Paycor had recognized that they needed to be able to offer their clients an ATS as a more fully integrated system. So they partnered with Newton Software as being, candidate first, cost effective, and a solution that would integrate with their system seamlessly. So as an early adopter, I signed up to be a beta tester so that I could get access to, early iterations of new functionality for the system. And their customer service is absolutely top notch. I loved how that system was created by a group of recruiters. And so, little things like calendar integration and resume parsing and the ability to send the offer letter via DocuSign looking very professional, especially for a small business, as well as the ability to launch and track the background check and use of their Echo technology, keeping that candidate communication and the record all in one place. That was a complete game changer for us. I mean, when I started with the care center, I said, what are you doing? And it was, going out there and posting jobs, and as well as receiving, kind of emailed applications. And we had an almighty spreadsheet that was, tracking everything, but it wasn't keeping that communication all in one place. There wasn't the ability to kind of see from a passive update of what was going on in that candidate record and with that person. And of course it was, here's your offer, please sign it and send it back to us. Well, that meant you had to print it out. That meant you had to find a way to scan it back, or, heaven forbid people were faxing things. I mean, that wasn't the way that we wanted to move our business forward. And so one thing that I also loved about Newton was that, updates happened quarterly rather than semi-annually or annually. So the system kept improving their functionality quickly and bugs were fixed timely. And so then I later implemented the system at Brightview and then also here at MBAH. And my top priority is candidate and hiring manager experience. And the fact that our application process is upload your resume, answer 3 questions. How did you hear about us? When can you start? And how much money do you want to make? You know, there's not a need in 2020 for a candidate to have to upload their resume and then have a 15-part process where they have to copy and paste pieces of their resume so that they can satisfy the information request in this process. It's really important to me that it's as simple as possible for them.
So you mentioned you were a beta tester. Did you have any reservations about using a newer system? Do you find yourself that maybe you're an early adopter in general, and that's why you were comfortable with it?
Yeah, so I have very much a spirit of continuous improvement. I'm not emotionally attached to processes or the way that things happen. So I'm excited to be a beta tester. I always want to find a quicker, better, more efficient way to do things, and not just for myself, but for others. I mean, I'll see how somebody is doing something and kind of say, hey, have you ever thought of doing this? Because I think that it could make that so much better, easier for you. And so for me, it was exciting to be a beta tester because I wanted to see kind of what the early thoughts were for the next generation of the system. And it was really neat that I got to provide input as a user, both on the hiring manager side, on the HR side, and then what the candidate experience would look like.
Yeah, I guess one of the main advantages I think of working with startups is that you can potentially influence the product. Were there any sort of like modules or anything that sort of got built into the product that were a result of you requesting a feature, or just sort of helping them to think about how to better serve their users?
So the early creation of the interview scorecard, I was part of the beta testing with that. I thought it was really neat that they were able to connect it to the invitation to the hiring manager. So it was, as soon as your interview's done, then you get your scorecard. And they were so customizable so that you could make sure that you were really focusing on the things that were important for the role. And it made it so much easier for the manager. Just what's your score, and their the scale even has a, like, what does this number mean? Like, what does this look like? And so that's very helpful for a manager when, their top priority is making sure that they get the best person on their team, but they aren't HR experts. They aren't recruiting experts. And so we want to make sure that we can provide functionality that really supports them and makes the process quicker and better for them, instead of something that's going to just, meet our needs and show up as, giving us the data that we want to have for our analytics piece.
Cool. I guess the sort of potential downside of working with a startup is you get sold a bill of goods that doesn't really exist, or you partner with an organization that maybe is not around in a couple of years. I mean, even Google Hire, their applicant tracking system, they sort of shut it down, and that's Google. Do you have any advice for organizations, teams that are looking to potentially partner with a startup in understanding whether or not this is a good idea or not?
Yeah, so I think you need to be really clear on what your needs are and make sure that you're not just looking at how cool and new and flashy the tech is. I'm guilty of that myself. I can take a look at something and go, oh, that's so cool. But then you don't think about the sustainability of that and how it's going to integrate with your other systems. And you don't want to create an experience where your managers have like 5 different logins. I mean, that's difficult. And so you want to think about, how do different systems integrate? My very first question to any vendor that reaches out to me is, can you integrate with my current systems? And the other piece to that also is you want to make sure that you can do a trial, that you can talk to other people that have already used it, or if it's brand new, what's the incentive to you to try this and to take this risk and to kind of disrupt your workforce and disrupt your, managers day to day. If, you do have that risk that it might not work out, they might not be, a long-term solution. And so you have to make sure that that risk reward is there.
Yeah. And was there any sort of internal selling that you had to do to get people on board? Or were people just like, look, you're the entire department, we trust your judgment?
Yeah. So, like I was saying, when I first started, the company was using Paycom's internal ATS, and I mean, Paycom will tell you that's not the strength of their system, and so it's an offering that they have, but it's not something that would be a standalone. And so I looked at that and the functionality compared to what I was used to, and I just, went to. I mean, I'm like a week or two into being with the company, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And I said, I'm starting to see things that I know could be addressed by using this other system that I've used before. The implementation takes 3 days. I mean, it's not a cumbersome process. It'd be very little disruption. But also, I'm going to give it about 30 days and I'll take a look and then I'll come back to you and let you know if I still think that we should move forward with that. And inevitably we did.
Got it. And I know that you've over time looked at other applicant tracking systems. What's sort of like the framework for how you think about something that and a potentially better solution that maybe costs more money, maybe has more risk because you don't know how to use it day to day, et cetera?
Yeah, so I had that happen actually. So Care Center that I had been with merged with several other emergency and specialty veterinary practices in July of 2015, and then was acquired by the PE-backed entity, Compassion First Pet Hospitals. And so I immediately started working closely with the corporate office and the executive team in New Jersey to share the systems that we were using at Care, because we were using Halogen, which is now Saba, for performance, and then we were also using Newton. And so the purpose of Compassion First and that entity is they were partnering and purchasing veterinary practices that had built their reputation on their brand. So we weren't rebranding any of the entities that we purchased and that we served. And so we needed a system that would support that ability to post open positions and to recruit under each individual hospital name and brand, rather than rolling up under one entity that had really no brand recognition. And so we took a look at iCIMS, and they had the ability to support all of those different brands. I mean, you could have different logos, completely different look and feels, depending on which entity it was, which hospital it was. And so I was fortunate to be asked to be part of the team to help implement iCIMS company-wide across 30 plus entities, and not just the 7 that I was supporting as a newly promoted regional director of HR. And so we got nearly to go live actually with our implementation before we decided that it wasn't going to meet our needs after all. There was some functionality with resume parsing and those post-nominal letters and credentials, which, we had veterinary surgeons and we had oncologists. And so that was an essential piece to us that just wasn't quite as expected, 5 years ago. And so it was going to take additional headcount and bandwidth that we really didn't have. And so we actually didn't move forward with the project.
That's interesting. I feel like there's probably an entire other interview about what you said at the very beginning, which is you come in a new organization, here's our tech stack. How is this addressing our needs? What are needs that are unmet, et cetera? What are point solutions maybe we can bring in to replace different parts of it while not disrupting the entire organization? And then also what you just said, where we were almost at a go live, then how do you roll that back? How do you, recruit maybe some of the budget that you've allocated to that contract, et cetera? So anyways, maybe we'll save all those topics for a future conversation. I guess my last question is just, do you have any last advice for HR recruiting teams out there who are looking at a new applicant tracking system, and maybe they're looking at a startup, a newer entrant like you were with Newton back in 2012, or maybe just in general? Are there any sort of like last tactical pieces of advice that you leave folks with?
Sure. I would say, one, you have to know what you need. And so you have to take a thorough analysis of what your current tech capabilities are, what systems you're currently using. You also have to look at the people that are going to be using the system. So in the case of with us, with the care center, I was really interested in halogen and I thought it was going to be really cool, but our current structure really didn't support that. And so we actually waited a year before we went ahead and implemented it because we had to build that team that was actually going to use the system. You don't want to implement a system that nobody uses, because the next time you ask to implement another system, you're going to have to push that much harder and kind of prove the worth of it because you've already done this investment. And either through, training, not being really aware and realistic of your adopters, and also what are the kind of competing priorities of the people that are going to be the users of your system. You need to make sure that you're not trying to implement something to meet your own timeline and your own goals, because HR is a servant function. We are there to support the organization. And so when you're bringing any new tech in, it needs to be to help to increase connectivity or to help to minimize the time that is spent on something. So if you can automate a process, if you can streamline a process, if you can do, take performance reviews, for example, out of a paper form to maybe a fill-in PDF because you're not ready for a system. But then when you are, you can take kind of that form that you created in the PDF and make that now in your system that is part of, your employee record, and your managers can see it. And that entire life cycle of that person will follow them through because it's all in that system. So there's a lot of different iterations that you can take, but you have to be really aware and realistic of what your capabilities are and your bandwidth, because this isn't going to be your full-time job. This is going to be another piece of your job. And so you have to make sure that whatever you do, that it really meets the needs of your organization and that it has the proper support.
Yeah, I think those are all amazing pieces of advice and a great place to leave this conversation. Nicole Roberts, thank you so much for taking the time out to share your story and also what you've learned about buying HR tech.
Thank you.